All right, it's live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for watching. Yay. Today, I'm very excited. We have Olly Richards from I will teach you a language.com. He is a good friend of mine. He speaks 8 languages, and his website has a lot of awesome content that help language learners to learn a language. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be back.
Awesome. So every month we'll invite a polyglot to come answer some of the burning questions that Add1Challengers, people who will participate in the Add1Challenge, their questions, and Olly is going to help us answer the questions. And the Add1Challenge is basically a community where language learners around the world all strive for the same goal of being able to hold that 15-minute conversation in just 90 days. It works, and it's a lot of fun, right, guys? Right? It's a lot of fun. Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
It's stressful at times.
Stressful at times. Thanks, Nikki. Because, of course, we're learning a language. And so, yeah, so check it out at Add1Challenge.com. You want to learn more. And so, one thing before we start, we want to give people a warning about Olly's situation. You want to share with us?
Yeah, good. Just to let you know, guys, I'm coming to you live from the dizzy heights of Cairo, and we've been having lots of power cuts recently, and the power just goes off randomly without warning. So if I disappear and you can't see me, don't panic. All I need to do is reposition the computer, steal the neighbor's Wi-Fi, and get the flashlight out, and then I'll be ready to jump back. So you might be without me for a couple of minutes, but hopefully I should be able to get back on the call if that happens.
If it happens.
If it happens. Crossing our fingers, it's not going to happen.
All right. Okay, cool. So let's jump right in. Nikki, why don't you go with your question first?
My question is, how can I avoid mixing up my languages? Like at the moment, I'm learning Comanche. I'm living in Albania, functioning in Albanian, and I have a little bit of Turkish. All 3 languages have a lot of words which came probably originally from Arabic and then into Albanian, I know, from Turkish, and probably Comanche from Turkish. And I sometimes find I'm using the Albanian words and grammar like verb endings. And also, for some reason, when someone says, "How are you?" in Comanche, and I know the answer done well, but I tend either to stutter or to reply in Turkish, which I'm actually out of practice with. And I'm hoping to go to Turkey, meet some of my old friends who are mostly Turkish, and new friends who are Kurds, so I'm going to need both languages. And how am I going to manage to avoid mixing them up there?
Yeah. For the benefit of people who don't know, could you tell us a bit about Comanche and what it actually is?
It's a language I've just discovered. It's not. It's a dialogue. It's a dialect of Kurdish. It's not actually a Turkic language, I discover. It has a different grammatical setup from other languages I know, slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It has a Latin script.
Sorry to interrupt. So we've got 3 pretty similar languages, and you're learning all of them at the same time.
Not really, but they have a similar vocabulary.
Right. Okay. Well, that's
they have similar words.
So, yeah. So there's plenty to get confused with. And then how would you describe your proficiency level in each of those languages? Because this is, I think, is key to the answer.
Albanian is fluent. I speak it more grammatically than most Albanians and read and write it better than most of the people around me. although I'm obviously a foreigner when I speak it. They know that before I open my mouth. Turkish I haven't used for 2.5 years. I reckon when I'm functioning, I'm probably about A1, but I find ways and means of having discussions that go deeper than A1 level. Comanche, I began in the middle of January, and I'm very much hampered for lack of resources. No decent dictionary, Google Translate doesn't work, no iTalki tutors of any sort, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So I think
it's very slow.
I think the you've got a few different things going on. I mean, first of all, the first thing to say is it's completely normal for that to happen. You know, I'm living here in Cairo and I'm spending my time learning Arabic, but I'm also trying to keep up Japanese and Cantonese at the same time. It happens to me that I'm going to speak to someone here locally and a Japanese word comes out completely involuntarily.
Yeah.
And, you know, there would have been a time that I would have said, wow, that's cool. But it's not cool because you're going to some guy on the street and speaking Japanese. It doesn't work. So the way, I think there's a few things. The first thing is it's very, very difficult to properly study 3 languages or even 2 languages at the same time.
I think not studying anything but Comanche at the moment, except that when I go to Turkey, I shall need to start revising my Turkish.
Okay, so when you say you get mixed up between the languages, it's I mean, you obviously speak them, and then different words come from the others.
Yes, I tend to lapse into Albanian, particularly
it's the one
with
that you know
Comanche,
that's strongest.
Yeah, but I also do it with English and German.
Sure. So I think what my approach to this would be to say, okay, my Albanian is very, very strong, and so what you need to do is to focus on the other 2. And I think the way to get a language to a point where you don't mix it up with other languages is by spending a sort of very focused, extended period of time within that language. So I think that whilst you're in a place where you're Comanche and you're Turkish, you're not actually studying them. I mean, that's what needs to change, I think. What I would do probably is to take one of those languages and then focus all of my attention on that. So I would, and it forces you to choose.
Yeah. No, I'm studying Comanche hard for the Add1Challenge, which will go on till about the beginning of June. After that, I may go to Turkey. Oh, we've lost him.
Oh, I'm still here.
Oh, yes. I may go to Turkey, in which case I'm going to need to brush up my Turkish.
Yeah, I think this is one of those difficult situations where you really are forced to choose, because if you're studying Comanche intensively now, then obviously when you go to Turkey, you're not going to have Turkish in your head. So you've got this kind of this difficult choice where you want to study Comanche, and yet you're going to Turkey, and they're not really compatible. And I would love to say that there's a good answer for that, but I don't think there is. I think I'd be tempted to say, well, either I'm going to just accept that this time when I go to Turkey, I'm not going to be at the level of fluency that I'd like to be, and then maybe save it for the next time, or else switch and then prepare yourself for the trip by spending more time with Turkish. But either way, I think when you're still in the early stages of a language, there's no choice other than to focus on one of them and to put all of your effort into that, to immerse yourself in the language every day, to speak it as much as possible. What I find is that once I get with the languages that I've learned, once I've gone beyond an intermediate level, the language takes on you kind of develop a personality in that language. You take on, you change and you adopt all these features of the language and the culture, and it becomes very difficult to lose it after that. I'm sure you experienced that with Albanian. So I mean, my suggestions to people when they say, how can I study 2 languages at the same time? It's always, well, don't study 2 languages at the same time, at least not equally. Put your attention on one, give it your best, and it will pay off. But I think the key is not to take on too much at the same time.
Or maybe put off my trip to Turkey, which would have to be either at the beginning of June or in the autumn.
Yeah, I mean, either way, but I think it's just important to separate and to really go intensively onto one of those languages in order to just really reap the benefits from that.
Yeah.
So I think she is studying hard and just studying her language right now, but it just accidentally. Yeah. So it just actually slipping out, and then and as Olly said, it's okay, and eventually when you actually you gotta get to a certain level before you start mixing the language. For me, I notice when I'm trying to speak a new foreign language, if it's more than one, or if they're both weak, it will just kind of grab whatever's there that shows up, and it just comes out, right? And so
it's like when you're learning a new language, you're gradually constructing this spider's web in your mind.
Totally.
And kind of just the web all starts to take form, and there's a moment when the web is complete, which is kind of upper intermediate level, at which point then you have it solid. Yeah. But until you've got that complete web there, it's not strong enough. It's too fragile, and I heard that metaphor from someone, maybe Luca, I don't remember, but I think that's a good way to think about it. It's kind of full steam ahead until you reach the top of the mountain, go over the other side, and then no one will take that away from you once you've got there. But you do have to get there in the first place.
Cool. All right, let's take a question from Add1Challenger. It's a similar question, but not exactly the same, since we're on this topic already. So this is what Tamara said. I've heard that when you learn multiple languages they're similar, for example, Spanish and Italian or Portuguese, it's easy to mix up the languages. And I've also heard that it's easier to learn a similar language once you've learned one. So which one is true? How do you recommend learning? How do you recommend learning and approach learning so that it's not confusing and mix up the similar languages?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question, and it comes back to exactly what we were talking about, which is do one thing at a time. Couple of things, couple of facts. A lot of people learn. A lot of people who speak multiple languages will speak Romance language, so they'll speak French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and this is what happened to me. I learned in that order. Well, I learned French, and then Italian, then Spanish, and then Portuguese. And at the time, I thought, wow, look how good I am at languages. I've learned 4 of them. But the reality is that they're all so similar. They share the same roots. The grammar requires minor tweaks. It's very easy to, well, I should say, it's relatively easy to acquire a number. What you find is that when you then go off and study language from a different origin, especially for example Asian languages or Arabic that I'm learning now, it's a completely different kettle of fish. So you've got this fact that if you're learning Romance languages, for example, French, Spanish, Italian, the fact that you've learned one will help you enormously when you learn the next. However, as we were saying before, if you learn one and then try to start another one before you got the first one well learned, then because of that same similarity that helps you in the first place, that's going to confuse you because you just haven't got it solid enough. So I would go back to taking this metaphor of the spider's web, and saying whatever language you're learning, learn that thoroughly first, and then after that, then you take on the next one, and it'll be much easier, and then the language after that will be much easier. Patience is a virtue, I think, in this situation.
Cool, awesome. So another question from the Add1Challenger, Jake. What do you like to do on low motivation days, or days where you have a limited amount of time?
Okay, I see these are two separate things.
Yeah.
First of all, I often have low motivation days all the time, and secondly, I always have days when I have no time. But I treat them slightly separately. Low motivation days, sometimes I do nothing. It really depends. So, I mean, to take now, for example, learning Arabic, I don't have a lot of great material that I like in Arabic. It's not, a lot of the stuff I find isn't particularly interesting to me. So if I have a low motivation day, then I won't do very much. But what I would do if I had the material I liked is I would watch TV dramas, I would listen to music, I would take this concept of downtime, and then I would, if I wasn't feeling up to studying, then I simply wouldn't study. But I would have the language around me in some ways. Like I said, I'd be watching TV in the language, I'd be listening to music, things like that. So I try to play to things that I like. So when I'm learning Cantonese, for example, I'll watch lots of TV dramas that I like. I'll put on some Cantonese music. Try to figure out what it is that you most like about your language, things that make you passionate about it, and then exploit that. Whether it's reading books, whether it's watching movies, do the things that you enjoy, because then motivation is not a problem.
Yeah.
I always say don't push it. If you're not feeling motivated, don't force it. Don't study if you really don't want to. Then don't force it. But you get a lot of benefit from spending a couple of hours watching a movie or watching and listening to music, reading a book, things like that. So I identify with what I like and I try to capitalize on that.
Cool. How about no time? No one time.
Okay. So the thing about time is that you don't need a lot of time to learn a language, and I very rarely sit down for more than 45 minutes to study. Often it's 10-15 minutes. So I have a number of things that my whole approach to language learning is a number of small things that I do on a regular basis. So flashcards. I have flashcards with me on my phone wherever I go. So I'm sitting in a taxi, I'll do 5 minutes of flashcards. I'm lucky enough to have Arabic people around me, so I'll have a 5-minute chat with someone. I will watch some stuff on YouTube whilst I'm eating my lunch. Listen to podcasts. So however busy I am, you've always got time in the day when you're not actively focusing on something. You're on the train, you're eating lunch, you're lying in bed. So I exploit those times to get even 5 minutes of exposure to the language, 5 minutes of practice on something. I use that time, and that's the real discipline that I think I try to keep up.
Awesome, cool. Kevin, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'll go. All right, Ollie. So you have an article that you posted once on Luca's blog about how to get an awesome accent, and in that article and in the accompanying video, you talked about how when you were in the UK, you constructed, or at least you had a community of Brazilian people that you hung around with, and that's how, or part of how, you got a really good accent. How did you go about finding people in your community that spoke the language you wanted to learn? Were there any specific methods you used?
Well, in that specific case, I think I was in the right place at the right time. I've got things that I do now, which we could talk about, but in that specific time, yeah, so I was living in London and I started learning Portuguese. And the reason I started learning Portuguese was because I met a couple of really awesome people that became really close friends of mine, and they were sort of trying to teach me a few words here and there. And so I had that point of contact. Mm-hmm. From there, what I did was I think because they were fluent English speakers, so they found it. They got some amusement out of teaching me a few words in Portuguese, but they weren't gonna sit there and talk to me in my useless Portuguese. So what I did was the same thing that I do now, which is if I need to find people, then I'll take, it just takes one native speaker that or maybe one or two people, and I say, look, I really want to practice. Do you know anyone who would like to learn English? And invariably the answer is yes, because they're plugged into the community. I get their email, their phone number, whatever. I try to you know, hook up with them in some way, and then arrange a language exchange, and then from there start to meet them in that way. So yeah, I mean, I was really lucky, and I was at university. I was studying music at uni, and it was a very international crowd of people. There were Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, Brazilian, a bunch of people, and London's a great city as well. So you know, there's no shortage of people around. So yeah, that's what I did. These days, I just use italki to find people.
Okay.
As simple as that.
I think one of the great way, not only to just asking people is one thing, that's easy, right? You just got to ask people, and not only asking people. I invite you to tell people what you're up to, meaning telling them, hey, I'm doing this challenge. I want to have a 15-minute conversation in 90 days. It's very hard, but I want to do it. So can you help me? When someone can see you taking on a challenge and they can contribute to it, they want to help. Because you know, people like to be part of that, something that's bigger than themselves.
Absolutely.
I mean, Kevin, behind your question is it like, do you find it difficult to find people to practice with?
Not necessarily difficult, just kind of the in-person stuff. I mean, I don't live in a city, so it's maybe that is just one of the more difficult aspects of it. But I was just curious if I don't know if you use like meetup groups, if there was anything specifically that you did to go out in the community and find these people. But obviously, you know, you explained that.
Yeah. Well, in the case, I mean, in the case of Portuguese, no, I didn't do it, but I have done it with other languages, and so with both Spanish and Japanese. I started learning Japanese in London. I mean, when I was learning Spanish, I remember being in a shop in Camden Town in North London, and noticing that the person that was serving was speaking Spanish, and so I just asked them, I'm learning Spanish. Do you wanna meet up and practice our languages? And she said no. But later on, there was another guy in a pub in where was it? In Baker Street, and he was a Colombian guy, spoke Spanish, and I just said, look, do you want to, I'm learning Spanish. Do you want to meet up? And he said yes, and then we met for 6 months, like 2 or 3 times a week. I think it's about being proactive and just being resourceful and looking around. You know, if you're a lawyer or a traveling salesman, you'd have to do this stuff for a living. You know, there's people out there. There's people everywhere. I think you just got to be resourceful. You've got to look around, look on community forums, hang out in cafes. There's always people out there, especially for French. I mean, French is such a huge language that I'm sure there are French people out there. You got to find them. But I'd still say that the internet it's a great place, and my favorite people to practice with are online.
Awesome. Thank you, Ollie. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
No worries.
All right. So next question. Nikki, do you have a question? Let me unmute you first. 1 second. 1 second. Oh, one second, Nikki. Nikki, 1 second, 1 second. Let's see, how do we... Okay. Are you on mute? Can you speak, Nikki? Can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? On top, there's like a mute button.
Yes. Yes. You can hear me now. Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Olly, I've been reading your book, and I've started to explore flashcards deluxe and Speeder, and I think they're going to be very useful. Once I've had the battle of finding out how to use them.
Yeah, that is the first step. Yeah.
No question, Nikki?
Not at the moment.
Okay, cool. So we have plenty of other questions. Okay, so this is a little bit, question from Miri from the Add1Challenge. She want to ask you, what is your 9-to-5 job? Is it okay to ask?
Yeah, I work for an organisation that's related to the British government. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but it does send me to various places. So I've been lucky enough to live in Japan and in Qatar and in Egypt, and hopefully I hope more places as well.
So what do you do?
So essentially, I basically am managing educational programs
Okay.
for in different places.
Cool. And can you tell us a little bit about how and when you start learning languages? Just a quick story.
Yeah, I mean, I did French and German at school, hated it, didn't understand why we were being forced to do it. Finished that at 16, did nothing for a few years. When I was 19, I had a life-changing experience, which I guess it is for every 19-year-old, which was that my girlfriend at the time, of 2 years, decided that she didn't want to see me anymore. And so I was a bit, shell-shocked, and I thought, and I was living in London at the time, and I just thought, I've got to get out of here. So I decided to go and live in Paris for a bit, just to change of scene. So I bought a one-way ticket on the Eurostar, went from London to Paris, set up in a youth hostel, and the rest was history, really. I just found myself in the middle of Paris, needing to work, needing to learn French, meeting people from all over the world. That was the kind of the beginning of it all.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for sharing it. All right. Another question from. Let's take a question from Add1Challenge email subscribers. Okay.
Nice.
So she said, I know 4 languages and learning 2 now. Now, the beginning of learning is really easy, but when it gets to the middle, like after 3-4 weeks, it gets harder. How can I overcome this?
3-4 weeks? Is that the middle?
That's the question.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're talking about that, okay, 2 things. First of all, what happens after 3 or 4 weeks? Then what I would consider the middle, which is after, when you're kind of at an intermediate stage, and you've been learning for a while, and you can't really get further. Which do you think she's referring to? Do you not know?
Maybe we just. How about what do you do when you reach a plateau? Just answer that.
It's a good question. For me, the plateau tends to come after about, there's various plateaus. I tend to get one after about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
When I've learned a bunch of stuff, and they've got that beginning phase where you're learning so many new words, and you start to have your first conversations. It's really exciting. Yeah. And then you want to take the next step, and it's difficult.
Yes.
That's just a question of time, pure and simple. I think a lot of the time we see a plateau as we think that we've stopped learning. But of course, we never stop learning. Your brain is always working, and sometimes you can take 2 or 3 months off actively studying, but your brain is still working in the background. And I've found in the past that some of the times that I've actually taken a big step up have been when I've actually been doing nothing. And it's because your brain sometimes just needs time to catch up and process. So the first message there is don't let it get better. If you're feeling frustrated, then just be aware of it, be mindful of the frustration, and carry on anyway. And then have faith that you will keep improving, because it's inevitable. It will happen. What you've got to make sure that you do is not stop. All right, so you have to keep going, because as soon as you stop, that's when everything starts to fall apart. So when you get these slumps in the early stages, the important thing is, remember, time is one of the 3 main factors that are crucial to language learning. The other 2 being motivation and the ability to notice language. Time is you can't get away from the fact that time is huge. So you have to give it time, and so keep going and don't get frustrated. In terms of when you reach that kind of intermediate plateau, that's more difficult because often you've been speaking for quite a while, you're fairly fluent, but still speaking kind of basic language. For me, I've always found that that's the time when you really need to hit the books. So you need to go back, study more, start to figure out how the grammar works exactly, some of the more advanced grammar. Start to read books so you get exposure to more complex language. So actually take the more academic route at that point. Those are the two key phases I see.
Yeah, what I hear is you kind of, when you hit a plateau, maybe switch up what you've been doing to something else and see how that goes and try something new.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to give it time, obviously.
Yeah, give it time first.
Yeah, there comes a point where you think, this is just not going anywhere. So yeah, at that stage, switch it up, try different things, absolutely.
And that happens also what you mentioned earlier in the Add1. It's some it happens all the time in the Add1Challenge that people get a lot of result in the beginning, and then they start slowing down. So when you compare if you compare your progress first month to the second month, of course it seems like it looks like a plateau, but it's actually not. It's just a different curve right now, you know?
Yeah, and at the same time, you've got to keep your eye on what you want. What do you want to achieve?
Conversation.
And for me, it's always speaking. My goal is always I want to be able to speak with people. I want to be able to hold conversations. So I just always come back to that thing. I want to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm going to speak, whether I'm motivated or not, whether I'm plateauing or not. It doesn't matter. I speak. I have these regular conversations, and I just do it. If you want to be a writer, you have to write every day. If you want to learn languages, if you want to speak a language, you have to speak. Maybe not every day, but every week. And so I always keep my eye on that and make sure that happens come what may.
Awesome. Cool. Another question from Add1Challenge. Add1Challengers from Doran. What would be a good way to learn word order? I'm trying to play with this. I hate grammar books.
Okay. Simple answer. So she hates grammar books, and yet she wants to know about grammar.
He hates grammar books.
I'd say. Sorry, is he or she? Sorry, I didn't get it.
It's a guy.
Dude, okay, sorry. Sorry, man. So you hate grammar, but you want to learn word order. Yeah. Here's the thing. Learn vocabulary in complete sentences. Okay? Stop learning single words. If you throw away your notebooks with lists of single words in the translations, when you're making notes, when you're writing things down, when you're putting them into your flashcards, put everything in full sentences and learn those full sentences. What will happen is you will start to notice the grammar that emerges from those full sentences, and it will start to come naturally. It's as simple as that.
Cool. How I like to do it is I just pick one structure. I don't call it grammar because I don't like the word, so I just call it structure. So for example, the structure that I practice today is I must, like hitsuyo, like I must do something in Japanese, and I'll just start making complete sentences with I must, one structure at a time. So you're not really, I look at structure and function and make sentences, like you said, make complete sentences.
Yeah, I mean it's a similar approach. I mean the difference would be that there you're taking a specific thing and you're practicing that specific thing. Yeah, and sometimes I do that as well, especially for something that's more complex. But I think also, when word order, I guess that he's referring to the word order for everything in the language. Not just not just how to say, for example, hitsuyo in Japanese, but also all these other things you want to learn. And so the way to do that is by taking language from lots of different places, keeping it in context, and then you get exposure to all these different types of grammar, these different sentence constructions, and all this word order will come naturally. But you've got to keep it in full sentences. And too often I see people just doing single words, and it's obviously it's not particularly harmful, but you're missing out on 80% of the richness of the language that you could be learning at the same time.
All right, cool. I think that's about it for today. We went for 35 minutes. Thank you, Olly. So, is there any? Where can we find you? If we want to find out more about you.
Yeah, well, you can visit the blog, Iwillteachyoualanguage.com. And also, since this is a Q&A session, thank you very much to everyone who's sent in their questions. Really good questions, man. You've obviously got some dedicated people on the Add1Challenge. If anyone has any questions that were not asked today, or they have any different questions that they'd like answered, I'm starting a new podcast, and the only thing I do on the podcast is answer your questions. So you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/podcast, and there you'll find a cool little widget where you can actually send me a voicemail, and I'll answer your question personally on the podcast.
Ooh. Awesome. Yeah, I forgot to ask you in the beginning. So you've been watching the Add1Challenge since the second Add1Challenge. We're on number 7 now. What do you think about the Add1Challenge?
I think I was in the first one, wasn't I? Or was it the second?
I think the second one.
Yeah. So I was in there. It was some time ago. So I imagine it's evolved and got even better since then.
Yeah.
But I learned an awful lot on the Add1Challenge. I'd already learned a number of languages before. So what was interesting for me was that when I entered this kind of community, this more structured way to learn, I learned some things about myself, both positive and negative, which was really informative. On one side, the fact that you've got this group of people who are so kind of motivating and just doing the same thing as you, this just makes you study every day. And I was learning Cantonese at the time, and I was in the Facebook group listening to what people had done, and I was, I got home from work every day, and I really wanted to study so that I could, go on there and post, I've done my 1 hour or whatever. So it's so motivating, and the fact that I was in the challenge certainly kept driving me forward, and I got far more results than I would have done anyway, because I'm naturally quite lazy, believe it or not. I'm not a particularly really motivated language learner. So that was really, really helpful. But I'll give you some comparison. I also said to myself at the time, right, I'm going to join the Add1Challenge, I'm going to take it really seriously. I'm going to study at least 1 up to 3 hours a day. And I took it too seriously. I was studying too much. I was forcing myself. I was pushing myself. And I ended up burning out within the challenge, which is not the fault of the challenge. It's my fault because I tried to take on too much. And although it was a kind of shitty experience, the thing is, it made me realize something very important about me and how I learn, which is that I need to have small, bite-sized chunks done regularly and not force myself. As soon as I force myself, I stop learning. It stops being enjoyable. So yeah, so basically, being in the Add1Challenge taught me so much about not only learning languages but how I learn, and that's the most valuable thing of all. Because once you know how you learn yourself, there's nothing stopping you. So yeah, it was a really, really great experience.
Cool. Thanks, Olly.
Brian did not pay me to say that. I will make that.
Yeah, maybe a little later, All right, cool, man. Okay, well, the participant, anything you guys want to say about the Add1Challenge? Kevin or Nikki?
I'll just say that, my story is similar to Olly's, where I had a lot of language learning experience coming in, and what the Add1Challenge has given me is definitely the consistency, definitely the reason to say, okay, I'm going to do my 1 hour every day. Because prior to the challenge, I would just, study on some days, and I took iMeet sessions every other day or something like that. But I wouldn't have that daily drive to say, I need to get this amount of time done every day. So it just gave me so much consistency, and just to say, okay, I need to do this, and then anything else is just extra. And my learning has taken off because of
Cool. Thank you. Nikki, you want to say something since we're, this is us here. Let's unmute.
Yes. I'd reached a plateau after about a month of struggling with Comanche, and then I watched the hang-up you did with Benny and thought this might be a good idea. So I joined the Add1Challenge, and it got me motivated. Got a very supportive team, and I find I'm wanting to get my hour in every day so as not to let the team down partly.
Yeah.
And everyone on the site is just so supportive. And I don't think this will be the last one I do.
Awesome. Well, I think it's very inspiring that you're learning languages, Nikki. And we're very happy to have you because you're so passionate about your language. So thank you for joining that.
Well, thank you for everything.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys around.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
See ya.
Yep.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.